What happened to women who practiced medicine before it was legal? Hey guys! Tonight we're settling into one of those gentle, meandering strolls through history where absolutely nothing exciting happens, which is honestly the best way to fall asleep. So go ahead and dim the lights, sink a little deeper into whatever pillow-like structure is currently supporting your spine, and let's drift into a world where women healed the sick, soothed aching bodies, and then, occasionally got arrested for it. Because of course they did. The story of women practicing medicine before it was allowed is one of those long, quiet sagas that every civilization seems to have on repeat. A woman helps. A woman heals. A woman saves a life. And society collectively goes, wait, not like that. It's predictable. It's slow. It's the definition of bedtime appropriate historical drama. So let's float back, way back, to the ancient world. Picture the soft glow of oil lamps, the muted clatter of clay cups, maybe a goat making suspicious eye contact in the background. Somewhere in this very peaceful, very dusty scene is a woman grinding herbs with a stone bowl older than your entire family tree. And she already knows what the men in charge will spend centuries debating: how to stop bleeding, how to ease childbirth, how to lower a fever, and how to do it without needing a marble statue erected in her honor. She's just doing the job. And that's the thing. Women practicing medicine is older than laws, older than writing, older than men with opinions. In prehistoric societies, healing was basically a household skill, right up there with making fire and pretending to like the taste of fermented roots. But the moment civilizations start organizing themselves, writing laws, forming professional guilds, deciding that being in charge of things is a personality trait, that's when you start seeing the first polite but firm, please stop saving lives without official permission, policies. Let's drift slowly into ancient Mesopotamia, one of humanity's very first bureaucratic playgrounds. Here, women healers existed openly. Some were temple priestesses, working in quiet stone sanctuaries that smelled faintly of incense and regret. They brewed remedies, bandaged wounds, whispered prayers, and, crucially, didn't have to ask anyone for an annual license to practice. A rare moment of peace. But of course, it couldn't last. By the time ancient Babylon is in full swing, we already have medical laws. And while these laws mention male physicians quite lovingly, women, not so much. They keep healing, of course. Mostly at home, mostly informally. But now medicine is becoming a profession, which is code for men are about to get territorial. Floating westward to ancient Egypt, women healers actually do pretty well. Egyptian society, being the overachiever that it was, allowed women to study, own property, and in some cases become officially recognized physicians. The papyrus rolls don't discriminate too harshly. So you get women like Peshet, often considered one of the earliest documented female medical practitioners. She supervised midwives, treated patients, and presumably minded her own business quite effectively. But here's the pattern: whenever women are allowed into medicine, it's usually in two categories: birth and herbs. Anything involving blood, surgery, or expensive tools tends to migrate into male hands faster than you can say, temple-funded monopoly. Now we float into ancient Greece, land of philosophers, statues, and men who really enjoyed telling other people what they could and couldn't do. Greece gives us one of the most famous stories in female medical lore, Agnotis. Legend has it she disguised herself as a man to become a doctor because women weren't allowed to study medicine. After gaining some fame for actually being good at her job, which was a little suspicious for a man, she revealed she was a woman, and then immediately got arrested. Classic. The charges were something like practicing medicine illegally, corrupting women, and probably making us look incompetent. Eventually, Athenian women apparently revolted and demanded her release, which is honestly one of the more iconic protests in ancient history. Agnotis is acquitted, but only after the men decide this won't confuse the universe too much. So women can practice medicine, but only on other women. Which is basically the ancient version of, sure, you can be a doctor, as long as you don't do anything fun. But agnotis also symbolizes something deeper. When women practiced medicine, even secretly, they were usually protected by the people they healed. The laws didn't like them. But communities often adored them. Now, drifting into ancient Rome. Rome is big on organization, roads, laws, schedules, the whole thing. They also had female doctors, called medici, who treated women, children, and anyone who was willing to ignore that little voice saying, "Shouldn't a capable man be doing this?" But Rome being Rome, legal recognition didn't guarantee safety. Women practitioners were always at risk of being labeled unlicensed, which was a polite way of saying, "We don't want to pay you or admit you're useful." Still, many practiced quietly, usually through family networks. Medical knowledge often passed from mother to daughter like a family recipe for fever-reducing soup. Now let's drift to early medieval Europe, where things get colder, darker, and significantly more male-dominated. This is where the vibe shifts. Because early Christianity, while good at cataloging sins and making everything feel slightly guilty, was not particularly enthusiastic about women taking on public roles, especially not roles involving sharp objects or knowledge. But life goes on, fevers happen, babies appear whether people want them or not, and women healers keep doing their essential, illegalish work. The medieval period gives us a fascinating figure, Trotta of Salerno, a woman associated with the famous medical school of Salerno in the 11th century. She wrote texts on women's health that circulated for centuries, sometimes anonymously, sometimes with her name erased by enthusiastic scribes who assumed Trotta must be a mistake because, obviously a woman couldn't have written medical literature. But Trotta's work survived because, again, it actually helped people. Her remedies worked. Her observations were sound. And patients don't tend to care about professional gatekeeping when they're bleeding, feverish, or actively giving birth. Still, medieval women healers had a problem: the male medical establishment was growing. Universities were forming. Professional guilds were rising. Licenses became a thing. And women, who weren't permitted to attend these schools, were suddenly considered untrained, even if they had been practicing for 30 years. It's a classic bureaucratic move. Step 1, make rules. Step 2, block women from participating. Step 3, declare women unqualified. A very soothing, very slow-motion form of discrimination. By the time we drift into late medieval and early modern Europe, things get even trickier. Because now the medical profession is transforming from something community-based to something more rigid and male-controlled. And women who continue practicing, especially herbalists and midwives, start getting suspicious labels. Cunning woman. Charm maker. Wise woman. And eventually the big one, witch. But not the dramatic broomstick kind. More like, she knows too much about plants and it makes me uncomfortable. Even here, though, it's important to remember that most women healers were simply tolerated. Even respected. They helped too many people. They were too woven into daily life. The laws were one thing, the actual practice was another. It's only when the political climate gets anxious, or when male physicians feel especially competitive, that things heat up. Which, ironically, often happens right when women's medical expertise becomes particularly needed, like during plagues or childbirth crises. Let's soften our eyes and glide further into the Renaissance, where male doctors are suddenly extremely invested in anatomy, expensive tools, and wearing medical robes that look suspiciously like wizard costumes. Women healers still exist, they never stopped, but now they're forced to navigate an increasingly hostile landscape. If they treat someone and it works, well, that's fine. If they treat someone and it doesn't work, which happens a lot because medicine at this point is mostly guesswork, the authorities start asking questions like, who gave you permission to diagnose that fever, and, why does your kitchen smell like boiling plants? A very suspicious era. And this slow, steady pressure continues right into early modern law. By the 16th and 17th centuries, many regions of Europe begin writing actual statutes forbidding unlicensed medical practice. Women, barred from universities, are automatically excluded. And so begins the era of prosecution, usually small, local cases, not dramatic witch trials, just quiet reprimands, fines, and the occasional imprisonment. Interestingly, most women healers didn't stop. They simply shifted. They practiced under the radar. They limited their help to neighbors. They adopted titles like midwife or wise woman, which were less regulated. And because herbal medicine actually worked for many conditions, especially compared to the medical techniques involving leeches, mercury, and optimism, communities kept relying on them. So the story of illegal female medicine isn't dramatic. It's not a thriller. It's just centuries of gentle persistence. Women healing quietly. Men writing laws loudly. And everyone pretending this arrangement made sense, drifting into the early modern world, where women healers become suspicious professionals. Alright, welcome back. Let's loosen the shoulders, unclench whatever you've been unconsciously clenching for the last hour or decade, and float gently into the early modern world, a place where people are still dying of things that a teaspoon of antibiotics could fix today, and yet somehow the biggest medical concern for governments is women with herbs. Because of course it is. Now that we've drifted through ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, and the medieval herbal cottage industry, it's time to cozy up next to a crackling 16th century hearth and watch the slow, soft bureaucratic storm roll in. The early modern period, roughly the 1500s to 1700s, is where medicine becomes an official club with passwords, uniforms, and a surprisingly fragile ego. This is the moment when the medical profession starts looking suspiciously like a gated community. Qualifications: essential. Degrees from a university. Required. Actual ability to heal. Optional. And you can probably see where this is going. Women, barred from universities, suddenly find themselves labeled as unlicensed practitioners, which is basically the historical equivalent of please stop being competent. But let's drift into this slowly, as if we're wading through honey. Because women don't disappear from medicine here, not at all. In fact, they flourish. They thrive. And that, predictably, annoys the people who enjoy writing laws. Float into a small English village around 1550. There's a midwife named Joan, though honestly, Joan is about as common as oxygen at this point, so feel free to imagine any name you like. Let's call her Joan version 47. She's delivered hundreds of babies. She knows exactly how to reposition a breech infant. She knows which teas reduce postpartum fever. She knows how to stop bleeding with pressure and prayers and a plant whose name she can't read because literacy is for people who don't have to milk their own goats. But Joan doesn't need a degree. She has experience. And experience, unfortunately, is something the new medical guilds do not appreciate. Male physicians, usually university trained, usually wealthy, often very fond of wearing robes that swish dramatically, enter the scene. And they begin filing complaints about untrained women meddling in medical matters, by which they mean competitors who are not required to pay annual guild fees. The guilds argue that women healers are dangerous. Except the female mortality rate during childbirth skyrockets whenever midwives are banned, which is awkward. So the guilds adjust, midwives can exist, but under strict supervision. And they must be approved. And regulated. And preferably ignored unless absolutely necessary. The tone here is very, we don't want to do the job, but we also don't want you doing it too well. Let's float south into France. Here, the medical faculty of the University of Paris is extremely aggressive about maintaining its monopoly over anything remotely medical. They accuse women healers of magical thinking, unlicensed practice, and occasionally, stealing patients. Meanwhile, the male physicians themselves recommend things like bloodletting, which, historically speaking, is not something you would want near your jugular. The irony is so soft and soothing you could almost fall asleep on it. And yet, in spite of all this noise, women continue to heal, as midwives, herbalists, neighborhood caregivers, and quiet specialists in everything male doctors find too messy or unprofitable. Now let's drift into the Netherlands, where things take a slightly different turn. Dutch cities are full of midwives who actually receive formal training, though still not university degrees. Towns hire them. Pay them. Give them regulations that somehow manage to be both restrictive and deeply unclear. And if anything goes wrong, anything at all, the midwife takes the blame. Infant dies. Midwife's fault. Mother gets fever. Midwife's fault. Comet passes overhead. Midwife's fault. The husband has questions because the baby looks suspiciously like the neighbor. Also midwife's fault. There's a pattern here. It's gentle. It's predictable. It's not exciting, which is good, because this is a sleep-inducing monologue, not a true crime channel. Now let's drift, very slowly, into Germany. Here, the situation is more intense, but in a very bureaucratic way. City ordinances ban unauthorized medical practice with the same energy modern cities use to ban unapproved street vendors. The laws often say things like, no woman shall give medical advice unless she is appointed by the council. And the number of women appointed by the council? 0, give or take none. So women continue practicing quietly, in kitchens that smell like rosemary and desperation, using wooden bowls, worn hands, and generations of oral knowledge. And they become tolerated. Not respected, but tolerated. Because they're needed. And that's the odd, sleepy contradiction of early modern medicine. Women are essential. Women are banned. And women keep doing the job anyway. But now we drift gently into the darker edge of the era, the early modern witch hunts. Now, don't worry, we're not taking this in a dramatic direction. No loud noises. No witch-burning montages. We're keeping this soft, factual, and comfortably monotone. The connection between witch trials and women healers is complicated. Contrary to popular belief, most midwives were not accused of witchcraft. Witchcraft accusations tended to fall on poor, older, socially isolated women, not highly trusted midwives. But there were cases where a healer's remedies failed. Or a wealthy man disliked her influence. Or a village needed someone to blame. And suddenly her herbal knowledge began to look unnatural. Medicine and magic were not cleanly separated in this era. Using herbs could be seen as practical. Or suspicious. Or completely normal. Or deeply sinful. Depending on the mood of the local clergy and whether the harvest failed that year. It's like living in a society where your job is simultaneously respected, tolerated, suspicious, and illegal, depending on which neighbor sees you carrying a plant on Tuesday. Let's drift to Scotland for a moment. Because Scottish law included one of the earliest formal bans on women performing medical procedures. The statutes don't say, please stop being helpful, but the subtext is loud enough to hear through centuries of sleepiness. Still, women continue. They tend to the sick. They attend births. They stop fevers with broths. They soothe toothaches with poultices that taste like forest floor and hope. Meanwhile, male physicians focus on Latin terminology, astrology charts, and bleeding patients until they faint. The contrast is very relaxing. Now let's glide gently across the ocean to colonial America. Here, the situation looks suspiciously familiar. Most medical care is performed by women in their households. They brew tonics, set minor fractures, deliver babies, and handle fevers with herbal remedies brought from Europe or borrowed from indigenous healers. Since there are very few licensed doctors, and even fewer who are any good, women's work is indispensable. But once again, the law floats into the picture like an overeager chaperone at a school dance. By the mid-1600s, several colonies begin passing laws against unauthorized medical practice. One Massachusetts woman, Margaret Jones, becomes a famous case. She was known for her healing abilities, her herbal treatments, and her somewhat stubborn personality, which, in Puritan society, was 3 strikes. She's accused of witchcraft, but her real crime seems to be that she was effective, outspoken, and not officially approved by the male-dominated system. A very common combination. Still, for every woman prosecuted, thousands continue practicing quietly, peacefully, endlessly. And this is where we see the real shape of the story. Women practicing medicine were not rare exceptions. They were the medical system. Births, fevers, infections, injuries, chronic pain, these were handled by women for most of human history. The only thing that changed over time was the paperwork. But the early modern period isn't the end of our journey. We still have to drift through Enlightenment reforms, the rise of chemical medicine, the Victorian era's obsession with fainting couches, and the 19th century crackdown on unlicensed healers, all of which shaped what happened to women who practiced medicine illegally. And don't worry, we'll get there. Slowly. Gently. With the energy of a historian who drank herbal tea at 2 a.m. and then started reading about 17th century midwifery laws because that's a reasonable life choice, drifting through the Enlightenment, when science woke up, but women were asked to leave the room. Settle in. Maybe shift the blanket a little. Maybe adjust the pillow so your neck feels like it belongs to a living creature again. Because we're gliding softly into the 1700s and 1800s, the Enlightenment and early scientific age, a calm, polite era where men put on powdered wigs, claimed they discovered reason, and then immediately used that reason to explain why women should stay out of medicine. The Enlightenment is that period where Europe collectively decides it's very smart now. Universities grow. Scientific societies form. Men begin publishing papers on everything from the movement of planets to the recommended number of leeches for a headache. Hint: too many. Medicine shifts from superstition to science, theoretically. In practice, it shifts from superstition to slightly more expensive superstition with Latin vocabulary. And this is the stage where women healers, who have been quietly running the unofficial healthcare system of the world, begin to face a new opponent: professionalization with a side of paperwork. Let's drift into France around 1750. Picture narrow streets, warm light flickering on stone walls, and men in white wigs discussing medical theory in coffeehouses as if caffeine is a valid substitute for clinical experience. The French Academy of Sciences blooms. Universities flourish. And women? Well, women are gently shown the exit. Midwives still exist, of course. Too many babies appear for the job to vanish. But now they're expected to train under male physicians, who, to put it gently, are not always familiar with the practical realities of childbirth. One physician in Paris famously attended his first birth and fainted so hard he broke a chair. But yes, these are the people in charge of training women. Midwives in this era can be licensed, but the licensing exams are designed by men who have never delivered a child and never will. So the exams are full of theoretical questions like: explain the humoral imbalance associated with complicated labors. Meanwhile, the midwives know real-world things like: if the baby's stuck, turn it. A deeply useful skill. But the Enlightenment wants order. And the order it chooses is, well, mostly male. Now let's float into England, where medical guilds are evolving into full professional bodies. Surgeons, who used to be lumped in with barbers, because they both owned sharp tools, are now separating themselves into a respectable profession. They form official colleges. They require degrees. They publish papers. They perform dissections, which is groundbreaking, educational, and, depending on the smell of the room, slightly traumatic. Women are not banned from learning science. They're just not included. As if participation requires a formal invitation that never arrives. Now, women healers have a new social label. Quacks. Not the animal kind, though honestly the comparison is not subtle. Quack becomes a catch-all term for anyone practicing medicine without a degree, which is convenient, since degrees are not available to women. But here's the soft irony. Many of the male physicians offering treatments are doing things that objectively do not work. While women using herbal remedies often are using methods that, actually help. It's like having a choice between a woman giving you willowbark tea, a natural source of salicylic acid, aka aspirin, or a man in a wig draining half your blood because Mercury is in retrograde. Guess which one the law prefers? Let's drift into Germany next, where universities are multiplying like enthusiastic mushrooms. Here, scientific medicine grows strong, anatomy, chemistry, physiology, all making steady progress. And as universities expand, the medical profession becomes more aggressively exclusive. Women healers continue practicing, but now they're labeled with new Enlightenment-flavored accusations. Superstitious, irrational, uneducated. Which is interesting, considering many male doctors have spent half their careers applying leeches with the confidence of a man who thinks he understands blood circulation. Still, the tone shifts. Instead of simply being illegal or frowned upon, women's healing is now framed as unscientific, even when their methods are based on centuries of observation. But let's not rush. Let's drift back to the warm kitchens of Europe, where women continue to boil herbs, whisper soothing instructions, and tend to the injured with quietly competent hands. Now we move to the 1800s, the Victorian era, a time famous for tightly laced corsets, emotional restraint, and an absolutely breathtaking amount of medical confusion. This is the age of chloroform, antiseptics, and high-waisted pants. It's also the age where women practicing medicine becomes a headline again, but in a very bureaucratic, legally complicated way. Let's glide into London around 1850. Streets foggy. Lamps glowing. Men coughing dramatically into handkerchiefs because tuberculosis is the aesthetic of the century. Here enters Elizabeth Blackwell, technically not part of the illegal practitioner category, but relevant because she becomes the first woman in America, and later in the UK, to receive a medical degree. And everyone reacts as if she has personally declared war on manhood. She gets accepted into medical school as a joke. Literally. The male students assumed her application was a prank. When she arrives in the classroom, many professors consider quitting. Others ignore her entirely. And the rest pretend she's invisible, which, honestly, becomes a recurring theme for the entire century. But Blackwell's success doesn't magically open doors for the thousands of women practitioners who never had access to medical school. Instead, it creates a strange double standard. If a woman heals without a degree, she's a criminal. If she tries to get a degree, she's a social threat. It's what you might call an unwinnable situation, wrapped in lace and social expectations. Back in the villages, female healers continue as before, quietly, discreetly, illegally. Their remedies still work. Their neighbors still trust them. And the male-dominated profession still insists that proper medicine involves Latin terminology and fees. Now let's drift north into Scotland, where legislation becomes wonderfully vague. Laws ban irregular practitioners, which can mean women, unlicensed men, herbalists, midwives, or possibly the neighbor's cat if it looks at a feverish person suspiciously. In practice, this means anyone outside the medical colleges is treated with distrust. But communities continue relying on traditional healers, especially in rural areas where the local physician might be a 3-day horse ride away and prone to fainting at the sight of bodily fluids. The contradictions are strangely peaceful. Women are officially discouraged, unofficially needed, and perpetually in a legal gray area that stretches on for centuries. Now let's drift into the United States during the early 19th century. Here, medicine is remarkably unregulated at first. Anyone can call themselves a doctor, including people who probably shouldn't be trusted with a fork. So women healers actually have a window of opportunity. They practice openly. They run herbal shops. They deliver babies. They set bones and treat fevers. But then mid-19th century medical licensing reforms begin. States start requiring degrees. Professional boards form. And suddenly women are excluded again. This leads to the rise of alternative medicine movements, herbalism, homeopathy, eclectic medicine, many of which are dominated by women because the mainstream profession won't have them. Ironically, these alternative groups often produce better outcomes than the official doctors, simply because their treatments involve fewer aggressive procedures, which the official doctors deeply resent. By the late 1800s, the medical profession locks itself down tightly. Licenses become essential. University education becomes mandatory. Degrees become status symbols. And the gap between legal doctor and illegal woman healer widens dramatically. But women don't disappear. They adapt. They shift into roles like nurses, midwives, herbalists, caregivers, domestic healers, early public health workers, and later, Civil War nurses and wartime medical assistants. And while male doctors write articles about female fragility, women continue doing the actual hands-on work.